In the bustling heart of Lagos, where millions of dreams collide with harsh reality every single day, a quiet miracle was about to unfold. A shy woman with extraordinary skills would cross paths with a powerful stranger, and in the most unexpected moment, when he glimpsed something sacred on her phone screen, everything would change forever. What started as a simple favor would become a story of hidden talents, unimaginable loss, and the kind of human connection that defies every boundary we think exists between different worlds. This is not just about fixing a broken device. This is about fixing broken hearts, shattered assumptions, and the invisible walls we build between ourselves and others. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the narrow windows of the cramped electronics workshop tucked away in the labyrinthine corners of Computer Village, Lagos. Most people hurried past the tiny storefront, without a second glance, its weathered sign barely visible, sandwiched between a phone accessory vendor and a printer repair booth. But inside this seemingly insignificant space, magic happened daily. Zara Okafor worked in near silence, her delicate fingers dancing across circuit boards with the precision of a master pianist. At 26, she possessed a rare gift that few people ever discovered. She could diagnose and repair electronic devices that others deemed hopeless. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, machines that had been declared dead by larger repair shops, found new life under her careful touch. Her workshop was a study in organized chaos. Shelves lined every wall, filled with salvaged parts, tiny screws sorted by size in repurposed pill bottles, and tools that had been passed down from her late father. The air smelled of solder and patience. Unlike the flashy repair centers in the upscale parts of Lagos, Zara's place had no neon signs, no promotional banners, no loud music drawing attention. It was a sanctuary for broken things, run by someone who understood brokenness intimately. Zara herself was as unassuming as her workshop. She stood barely 5 feet tall, with natural hair she kept in simple protective styles and skin that glowed, despite the long hours she spent hunched over microscopic components. Her clothes were always practical, loose-fitting pants and cotton tops that wouldn't catch on sharp edges, colors that wouldn't show inevitable stains from her work. She moved through the world like someone trying not to take up too much space, speaking in soft tones when she spoke at all. This morning was like countless others. She had arrived at dawn, before the vendors outside began their daily cacophony of sales pitches and negotiations. The first device on her workbench was a water-damaged tablet belonging to a university student who couldn't afford to lose his thesis research. The second was an iPhone with a shattered screen and mysterious software glitches that had stumped 3 other repair shops. The third was a vintage laptop that held a small business owner's entire customer database. Each device told a story of desperation, of people who couldn't afford to simply replace their technology, who needed someone with both skill and compassion to help them recover what mattered most. Zara understood this because she had lived it. Growing up in a single-parent household after her father's death, she had learned early that throwing things away wasn't an option when you couldn't afford replacements. Her relationship with technology had begun out of necessity when she was 12 years old. Their family's only radio had stopped working, and her mother had been saving for months to replace it. It was their only source of news and entertainment. Instead of waiting, Zara had carefully opened the device and spent hours studying its internal architecture. She had no manual, no internet tutorials, just curiosity and determination. When she finally identified the loose connection and soldered it back into place, the radio crackled to life, and her mother had cried tears of joy. That moment had changed everything. Word spread through their neighborhood about the girl who could fix anything electronic. Neighbors began bringing her their broken devices, offering small payments that helped her family survive. She taught herself by taking apart discarded electronics, studying their components, understanding how each piece contributed to the whole. While other children played, she dissected old computers and phones, building a knowledge base that would rival any formal education. Now, more than a decade later, her reputation had grown quietly but steadily. She didn't advertise, didn't network, didn't promote herself on social media. Her customers found her through word of mouth, drawn by stories of impossible repairs and reasonable prices. They came from all walks of life: students, small business owners, elderly people whose devices held precious family photos, young parents who couldn't afford new phones. But success hadn't changed Zara's fundamental nature. She remained painfully shy, especially around strangers. While she could speak confidently about technical problems and solutions, personal interactions left her tongue-tied and anxious. She preferred the predictability of circuits to the complexity of human relationships, the honesty of broken components, to the confusion of social expectations. Her shyness had deeper roots than mere personality. Years of being overlooked, of having her intelligence underestimated because of her quiet demeanor and humble circumstances, had taught her to doubt her own worth outside the technical realm. In her workshop, surrounded by her tools and expertise, she felt confident and capable. But step outside those familiar walls, and she became uncertain, second-guessing herself, retreating into the safety of silence. This morning, as she carefully removed the back panel of the water-damaged tablet, her phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Emmanuel. He was studying engineering at the University of Lagos, his education funded largely by Zara's repair work. The message was brief but warm. "Thank you for making my dreams possible, sister. Your sacrifice means everything." She smiled softly, her heart swelling with quiet pride. This was why she worked such long hours, why she accepted projects that others considered impossible. Every device she repaired, every satisfied customer brought her one step closer to securing her brother's future. He was brilliant, destined for greatness, and she was determined to ensure that lack of money would never limit his potential the way it had limited hers. As she returned to her work, Zara noticed something she hadn't observed before. The tablet's owner, the university student, had left a small note tucked between the pages of a notebook on her counter. "Dear repair lady," it read, "I don't know your name, but you're the only person who believed this tablet could be saved. My entire thesis is on here. 2 years of research about sustainable farming in Nigeria. If you can restore this, you're not just fixing a device, you're helping feed future generations. Thank you for caring about the dreams of strangers." The note struck something deep within her. She realized that her work wasn't just about repairing electronics. It was about restoring hope, preserving dreams, connecting people to what mattered most in their lives. Every device that crossed her workbench carried someone's digital life: family photos, important documents, creative projects, business records, memories that couldn't be replaced. She understood this intimately because her own phone held treasures that were irreplaceable. Her wallpaper, an image she looked at dozens of times each day, was more than just a picture. It was a reminder of love, loss, and the fragile nature of human connection. Few people had ever seen it, and those who had understood why it was so precious to her. As the morning progressed, Zara lost herself in the meditative rhythm of repair work. She carefully cleaned corrosion from the tablet's internal components, replaced damaged circuits, and slowly coaxed the device back to life. Each step required patience, precision, and an almost mystical understanding of how technology should function when it's healthy. The sun climbed higher, and the sounds of Computer Village grew louder outside her workshop. Vendors called out their wares, Customers haggled over prices, and the general chaos of commerce filled the air. But inside her sanctuary, Zara worked in peaceful concentration, unaware that this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become extraordinary. She had no way of knowing that in a few hours, a stranger would enter her workshop carrying a device that would change everything. She couldn't imagine that her quiet expertise would intersect with a world of power and influence she had never dreamed of touching. And she certainly couldn't foresee that the most private image on her phone, the wallpaper she treasured above all else, would become the key to unlocking a story of human connection that would transform not just her life, but the life of someone she had never met. For now, she simply worked, her gentle hands bringing broken things back to life, her kind heart open to the possibility that today might be different from all the days that came before. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The midday heat pressed down on Lagos like a heavy blanket, turning the air thick and still. Computer Village buzzed with its usual energy, vendors shouting prices, customers examining products, and the constant hum of generators powering the countless electronics stalls. But inside Zara's workshop, the atmosphere remained cool and focused. She had successfully revived the university student's tablet, watching with quiet satisfaction as the screen flickered to life and displayed 2 years of agricultural research. The relief she felt wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. She understood what it meant to have your future hanging by a thread, dependent on the kindness and skill of strangers. As she carefully cleaned the restored tablet screen, preparing it for pickup, the sound of expensive leather shoes on concrete caught her attention. The footsteps were different from the usual shuffle of flip-flops and worn sneakers that typically approached her workshop. These steps were deliberate, confident, and unmistakably foreign to this environment. Zara looked up to see a man standing in her doorway, and her breath caught slightly. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with olive skin and sharp Mediterranean features that spoke of wealth and privilege. His navy blue suit, despite the oppressive heat, remained crisp and unwrinkled. Dark hair was styled with precision, and his beard was trimmed to perfection, but what struck her most were his eyes, deep brown, intelligent, and currently filled with a frustration that seemed at odds with his composed exterior. In his manicured hands, he held what appeared to be the latest iPhone model, its screen completely black and unresponsive. He glanced around her workshop with the careful assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating situations quickly. His gaze lingered on her organized tool collection, the neat rows of salvaged components, and the various devices in different stages of repair. "Excuse me," he said, his English accented with what sounded like a blend of Arabic and European influences. His voice was cultured, the kind that commanded attention in boardrooms and conference calls. "I was told someone here might be able to help with this." Zara felt her usual shyness intensify under his direct gaze. Men like this, polished, powerful, clearly from a world entirely different from hers, made her acutely aware of her simple clothes, her modest surroundings, and her soft-spoken nature. She wiped her hands nervously on a clean cloth before responding. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped into the workshop, his presence seeming to fill the small space. It died completely during an important call this morning. No warning, no gradual failure, just went black and won't respond to anything. I've tried multiple chargers, different power sources, holding various button combinations. Nothing. As he spoke, Zara noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when he mentioned the important call. This wasn't just about inconvenience. This device clearly contained something critical to him. I went to 3 different repair shops in Victoria Island, he continued, naming one of Lagos's most upscale districts. They all said the same thing: water damage, motherboard failure, impossible to recover without sending it to the manufacturer. But I can't wait weeks for a replacement or recovery. I need the data on this phone today. Zara nodded, extending her hand to receive the device. Their fingers brushed briefly as he passed it to her, and she noticed his were slightly trembling, a detail that didn't match his composed exterior. Whatever was on this phone meant more to him than he was letting on. "I'm Khalil," he said, introducing himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to networking. "Khalil al-Rashid." "Zara," she replied softly, already examining the phone with practiced eyes. She noticed immediately that it was completely pristine except for being non-functional. No visible damage, no signs of water exposure, no cracked screen or dented corners. This ruled out several obvious causes. "I should mention," Khalil added, watching her initial assessment, "I'm willing to pay whatever it costs. Money is not a concern. I just need my data back." Something in his tone made Zara look up. She had heard desperation disguised as authority before, usually from people whose entire livelihood depended on the information stored in their devices. But this felt different. This felt personal. "Before we discuss payment," she said, her voice gaining slight confidence as she shifted into professional mode, "let me understand what we're dealing with. Can you tell me exactly what happened when it failed?" Khalil ran a hand through his hair, the first crack in his polished demeanor. "I was in the middle of a video call with my team in Dubai. The phone was fully charged, working perfectly. Then, suddenly the screen went black mid-sentence. I thought maybe the call had dropped, but when I tried to turn it back on, nothing. It's been completely dead for 6 hours now." Zara nodded, connecting the phone to her diagnostic equipment. The specialized tools her father had taught her to use could often detect signs of life that weren't visible to standard testing methods. As various cables and devices whirred to life around the phone, she began her systematic analysis. "No power. Draw at all," she murmured, more to herself than to Khalil. "But the charging port appears clean, and there's no obvious physical damage." She worked with the focused intensity that had made her reputation, occasionally glancing up to find Khalil watching her every move with an expression that seemed equal parts hope and amazement. Most people who brought her their devices expected her to work miracles, but few actually watched the process with such keen interest. "You know," Khalil said after several minutes of silence, "I've been to repair shops in London, Dubai, New York. I've never seen anyone work with quite this level of precision." Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks at the compliment. "My father taught me that every device has a story," she replied quietly. "You have to listen to what it's trying to tell you about what went wrong." "That's an interesting philosophy," Khalil said, genuine curiosity in his voice. "What's this one telling you?" Zara hesitated, then decided to share her initial assessment. "It's not water damage or physical trauma. The failure pattern suggests either a catastrophic software corruption or a very specific hardware failure, possibly in the power management system. But, Khalil prompted, "but the way you described the failure, sudden, complete, during active use, that's unusual for either of those causes. There might be something else going on." As she spoke, Zara connected the phone to a more sophisticated piece of equipment, a device she had built herself from salvaged components and open-source software. It could sometimes detect electrical activity that commercial diagnostic tools missed. "This is remarkable," Khalil said, examining her custom-built diagnostic system. "You created this yourself?" "Necessity," Zara replied simply. "Commercial diagnostic. Equipment costs more than I make in a year, so I learned to build what I needed." Something shifted in Khalil's expression, a look of respect that seemed different from his earlier politeness. That's incredibly resourceful and effective. Apparently, Zara's equipment began displaying readings that made her pause. "That's interesting," she said, leaning closer to the screen. "There is electrical activity in the device, very faint, but it's there. The phone isn't actually dead. It's in some kind of protective shutdown mode." "What does that mean?" Khalil asked, stepping closer to see what she was seeing. "It means the hardware is probably fine, but something triggered an emergency shutdown to prevent damage. The question is what caused it and how to safely wake it up without triggering the same shutdown again." Zara began working with renewed focus, her shyness temporarily forgotten in the excitement of solving a complex puzzle. She connected additional monitoring equipment, ran test sequences, and slowly began to understand the phone's condition. "Your phone received a massive electromagnetic pulse of some kind," she said finally, "not strong enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to confuse its internal systems into thinking there was a critical failure. The good news is that all your data should be intact. The challenging news is that bringing it back online requires convincing the phone that it's safe to restart." Khalil exhaled deeply, the first sign of real relief she had seen from him. "How long will that take?" "Maybe an hour, if I'm right about the cause. Maybe longer if there are complications. But—" Zara hesitated, then continued with quiet confidence. "I think I can bring it back. Why do I believe you can accomplish what 3 other shops couldn't?" Khalil asked, and there was something almost wondering in his voice. Zara looked up at him, meeting his eyes directly for the first time since he had arrived. "Because they probably tried to force it back on. I'm going to ask it politely." For the first time since entering her workshop, Khalil smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his entire face and made him seem suddenly more human, less intimidating. "Then please," he said, settling into the chair she gestured toward, "ask." "Wait, I'll wait as long as it takes." As Zara began the delicate process of coaxing the phone back to life, neither she nor Khalil could have imagined that this simple repair would lead to a moment of profound human connection. Neither could foresee that when the device finally awakened, the first thing Khalil would see would change both of their lives forever. For now, there was just the quiet hum of electronics, the patient work of skilled hands, and the beginning of trust between 2 people from completely different worlds. The afternoon stretched on as Zara worked with the methodical patience of a surgeon. Khalil had initially tried to make small talk, but gradually fell silent as he watched her process, the way she approached each step with careful deliberation, testing and retesting before moving forward. There was something almost meditative about observing her work, and despite his usual restlessness when not in control of a situation, he found himself oddly calm. Zara's workshop had transformed into something resembling a high-tech medical bay. Multiple diagnostic devices surrounded the phone, their screens displaying heartbeat-like readings that monitored various electrical systems within the device. Tiny probes connected to microscopic contact points on the phone's circuit board, while her custom-built equipment ran continuous system checks. The electromagnetic pulse didn't just trigger a shutdown, Zara explained as she worked, her voice growing more confident as she delved deeper into technical territory. It scrambled some of the phone's safety protocols. Think of it like amnesia. The phone knows something bad happened, but it can't remember what or why, so it's afraid to wake up. Khalil leaned forward, genuinely fascinated. "How do you teach a phone to trust again?" "Very carefully," Zara replied, adjusting a setting on one of her devices. "I'm essentially having a conversation with its basic systems, convincing each one individually that it's safe to come back online. First the power management, then memory systems, then communications." As she spoke, one of her monitors showed a subtle change, a faint pulse where there had been steady flatline before. Zara's eyes lit up with quiet excitement. "There," she whispered. "The power system is listening." Over the next 30 minutes, Khalil watched in amazement as Zara coaxed system after system back to life. It was like watching someone resurrect the dead through pure technical knowledge and intuitive understanding. She seemed to know exactly which systems to wake first, how long to wait between each activation, and what signals indicated success versus potential failure. "I've never seen anything like this," Khalil said, shaking his head. "In my business, when technology fails, we usually just replace it and move on. But this is artistry." Zara glanced up, surprise flickering across her face. "What kind of business are you in?" "Technology consulting, international development projects," Khalil replied, somewhat vaguely. "I work with companies and governments to implement large-scale digital infrastructure. My team and I travel constantly, managing projects across the Middle East and Africa." "That sounds important," Zara said, returning her attention to the phone. "Is that why you need this data so urgently?" Khalil hesitated, and something in his silence made Zara look up again. His expression had grown distant, almost pained. "It's personal," he said finally. "The most recent photos and messages on that phone, they're irreplaceable, family things." Zara nodded, understanding immediately. She had learned never to probe when someone mentioned family data. People's digital lives contained their most precious memories, and losing them could be devastating in ways that outsiders couldn't comprehend. "We'll get them back," she said with quiet certainty. "I promise." The sincerity in her voice seemed to affect Khalil deeply. He studied her face for a moment, as if trying to understand how someone so young and seemingly modest could possess such confidence in her abilities. "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly. "I mean, you clearly have extraordinary skills. You could probably work for any major technology company in the world. Yet you're here, in a small workshop, fixing devices for—" He trailed off, perhaps realizing his question might sound condescending. "For people like me?" Zara finished, not defensively but with gentle humor. "Because this is where I'm needed most. The big companies, they'll survive without me, but the student whose thesis is on a broken tablet, the small business owner whose customer database crashed, the grandmother whose only photos of her grandchildren are trapped on a dead phone, they need someone who understands that technology isn't just about convenience. It's about preserving what matters most to us." Khalil was quiet for a long moment. "That's a beautiful perspective. It's also practical," Zara added with a small smile. "Big tech companies wouldn't hire someone without formal qualifications anyway. Self-taught doesn't carry much weight on a resume." "That's their loss," Khalil said firmly. "What you're doing right now proves that expertise doesn't always come from classrooms." As if responding to their conversation, the phone suddenly showed signs of more significant activity. Multiple systems began coming online simultaneously, and Zara quickly adjusted her equipment to monitor the reboot process. "This is it," she said, tension creeping into her voice. "If the restart sequence completes successfully, we'll have your phone back. If something goes wrong now—" "It won't," Khalil said with surprising confidence. "I trust you." The simple statement hit Zara unexpectedly hard. Trust was something she rarely experienced from strangers, especially those from worlds so different from her own. Most customers tolerated her expertise because they had no choice, but this man, who could afford to replace his phone without thinking twice about the cost, was choosing to believe in her abilities. For several tense minutes, they watched as the phone's various systems cycled through their startup routines. Occasionally, Zara would make minor adjustments to her equipment, guiding the process with the skill of someone conducting a delicate orchestra. Khalil found himself holding his breath, invested now not just in recovering his data, but in witnessing Zara succeed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the phone's screen flickered. Once, twice, then steadied into the familiar startup logo. Yes, Zara breathed, allowing herself a moment of celebration before immediately returning to monitoring mode. Now we wait to see if it completes the full boot sequence. The progress bar crept forward, agonizingly slowly. Both Zara and Khalil leaned forward, watching each pixel of advancement. When the screen finally transitioned to the lock screen, showing a simple wallpaper of geometric patterns, Zara exhaled deeply. "It's alive," she announced with quiet triumph. "All systems appear to be functioning normally." Khalil stared at the phone for a moment, as if hardly believing it was real. "How do I don't know how to thank you. Those other shops said it was impossible." "It wasn't impossible," Zara replied, carefully disconnecting her equipment. "It just required a different approach." She handed him the phone, and he immediately began entering his passcode. As the device unlocked and his familiar home screen appeared, his relief was palpable. He quickly navigated to his photo gallery, scrolling through recent images, checking messages, confirming that everything was intact. "Everything's here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every photo, every message, everything." He looked up at her with an expression of pure gratitude. "You have no idea what this means to me." Zara felt a warm glow of satisfaction that had nothing to do with payment or recognition. This was why she did what she did, for moments like this, when her skills could restore something precious to someone who had thought it was lost forever. "I'm just glad I could help," she said simply. Khalil sat quietly for a moment, still holding his phone, still seeming somewhat overwhelmed by its recovery. Then he looked around her workshop again, taking in the modest surroundings, the creative solutions, the evidence of someone making extraordinary things happen with limited resources. "Would you mind if I asked you something?" he said. "Of course." "Show me your phone," he said. "I want to see what someone with your technical skills uses for her own device." Zara hesitated. Her phone was nothing special, an older model Android device that she had modified and optimized for her needs. But more than that, showing someone her phone meant potentially revealing personal things, including her wallpaper, which was something deeply private to her. "It's nothing fancy," she said, pulling the device from her pocket with reluctance. "I'm not interested in fancy," Khalil replied. "I'm interested in practical excellence." Zara unlocked her phone and handed it to him, watching nervously as he examined her customized interface, her optimized settings, her collection of technical apps that most people had never heard of. "This is remarkable," he said, scrolling through her app organization. "You've modified the entire operating system, haven't you? These efficiency improvements, the custom diagnostic tools, this is professional-level development work." Zara nodded modestly. "I needed tools that weren't available commercially, so I learned to create them." Khalil continued exploring her phone, impressed by the sophistication of her modifications. Then, as he was about to hand it back to her, something made him pause. He had caught a glimpse of her wallpaper when the screen briefly rotated, and what he saw there made his breath catch in his throat. His hands began to tremble as he looked more closely at the image. His eyes widened, then filled with tears that he couldn't control. "Where?" he whispered, his voice breaking. "Where did you get this photograph?" The silence in the workshop became deafening. Khalil's question hung in the air like a prayer, his trembling hands still holding Zara's phone, his eyes fixed on the wallpaper image with an intensity that bordered on disbelief. Tears streamed down his face, cutting tracks through his composed businessman facade and revealing something raw and vulnerable beneath. Zara felt her heart racing, confusion and concern washing over her in equal measure. She had never seen a stranger react so powerfully to something on her phone, and the sight of this polished, confident man breaking down in her workshop left her completely unprepared. I don't understand," she said softly, instinctively reaching toward her phone. "What's wrong? What do you see?" Khalil couldn't speak for a moment. He simply stared at the screen, his breathing shallow and uneven. The image that served as Zara's wallpaper was a photograph she had treasured for years, a picture of a young woman with bright eyes and a radiant smile, standing in front of a university building wearing a graduation cap and gown. The woman looked remarkably similar to Zara, but older, more confident, with an infectious joy that seemed to leap from the screen. "This woman," Khalil finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. "This beautiful woman in the photograph. What is she to you?" Zara's protective instincts kicked in immediately. The photograph was her most precious possession, and the story behind it was something she rarely shared with anyone. But something in Khalil's expression, the genuine anguish, the desperate hope, made her hesitate before deflecting his question. She was my sister," Zara said carefully, watching Khalil's face for his reaction. "Her name was Amara. But I don't understand why you're asking or why seeing her photo would make you—" "Amara," Khalil breathed, as if the name itself was sacred. "Amara Okafor." Zara felt the world shift beneath her feet. "How do you know her full name?" Khalil's hands were shaking so violently now that he could barely hold the phone. He looked up at Zara with eyes full of a pain so deep and complicated that she instinctively stepped back. "Because," he said, his voice breaking completely, "I loved her. I was going to marry her." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She stared at Khalil, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of cruel joke or mistaken identity. But the anguish in his expression was too real, too specific, too devastating to be anything but genuine. "That's impossible," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she was remembering things, fragments of conversations with Amara in the months before her death. Her sister's secretive phone calls, her mysterious happiness, her talk of someone special she had met during her final semester at university. Someone she described as kind, intelligent, from a different world, but with a heart that understood. "Hers. She never told you about me," Khalil said, reading her expression correctly. "I'm not surprised. We agreed to keep our relationship private until after her graduation. My family, her family, there were complications we thought we could work through with time." Zara's mind raced backward through her memories. Amara had been completing her master's degree in international development at the University of Lagos when she died. She had been brilliant, charismatic, everything that Zara felt she could never be. And in those final months, she had been radiantly happy about something she wouldn't fully explain. "You're the reason she was always smiling," Zara said more, to herself than to Khalil. Those last few months she was glowing. She said she had met someone who made her believe in fairy tales again. Fresh tears spilled down Khalil's cheeks. "She used to say that about me, that I made her believe in fairy tales." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, struggling to compose himself. When did she... "3 years ago," Zara said quietly. "A car accident on her way home from campus. The other driver was drunk. She died instantly." Khalil doubled over as if he had been punched. The composed businessman completely disappeared, replaced by a man experiencing fresh grief for a loss he had never properly processed. He sobbed openly, the sound echoing in the small workshop, years of suppressed pain finally finding release. Zara watched him, her own emotions a chaotic mixture of shock, sympathy, and a strange sense of connection. This stranger was mourning her sister with the same devastating intensity that had nearly destroyed her own life 3 years ago. "I waited for her," Khalil said when he could speak again. "At our usual meeting place near campus, we were supposed to have dinner, to talk about meeting each other's families. When she didn't show up, I thought maybe she had changed her mind about us. I called and texted, but got no response. After a week, I assumed she had decided our relationship was too complicated. She never got your messages, Zara said, understanding dawning. Her phone was destroyed in the accident, and the funeral was so sudden, so small, just immediate family and a few close friends from university. I never knew she had died, Khalil said, the words coming out like a confession. I left Lagos shortly after, thinking she had chosen to end things between us. I moved back to Dubai, threw myself into work, tried to forget her, but I never could. She was the love of my life. Zara felt tears beginning to form in her own eyes. The tragedy of their situation was overwhelming. Two people who had loved the same woman, who had both lost her, who had never known of each other's existence until this impossible moment. She talked about you, Zara said softly. Not by name, but about someone who had changed her perspective on everything. She said you came from different worlds, but that you understood each other perfectly. She was planning something, some kind of announcement. I think she was going to tell our family about you. Khalil looked up at her with desperate hope. Really? She was happier than I had ever seen her, and Amara was already a happy person, but with you, she was luminous. They sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The photograph that Zara had carried as a private memorial to her sister had suddenly become a bridge connecting two people who had shared the most important person in both their lives. May I tell you about her? Khalil asked eventually. About who she was when she was with me. I've never had anyone to share those memories with. Zara nodded, settling back in her chair. Despite the emotional intensity of the moment, she found herself hungry to hear about this side of her sister that she had never known. She was studying the intersection of technology and sustainable development, Khalil began, his voice growing steadier as he talked about Amara. Her thesis was about using mobile technology to connect small farmers with larger markets. She believed that innovation should serve the people who need it most, not just the people who can afford it most. That sounds like her, Zara said with a small smile. She always said that knowledge was only valuable if you used it to help others. Exactly. That's what drew me to her initially. Her presentation at an academic conference about digital inclusion in rural communities. She was brilliant, passionate, completely unimpressed by my business credentials. When I tried to network with her afterward, she told me that unless I was planning to use my resources to actually help people instead of just making money, she wasn't interested in talking to me. Despite everything, Zara found herself laughing. That's definitely Amara. She never had patience for people who were all talk and no action. She challenged me to be better, Khalil continued, made me rethink everything about my career, my priorities, my understanding of what success actually means. Because of her, I started focusing on projects that created real social impact, not just profit. Is that what you were working on when your phone died? Zara asked. Khalil nodded. A digital literacy program for rural communities across West Africa. It's been my primary focus for the past 2 years, trying to build the kind of thing she would have been proud of. As he spoke, Zara began to see him differently, not just as a wealthy businessman who had stumbled into her workshop, but as someone who had been shaped by the same person who had shaped her own values and aspirations. The photos on your phone, she said suddenly, understanding. The family. Data you needed so desperately. They're pictures of Amara, aren't they? Khalil's composure cracked again. The only ones I have. We were so careful about privacy, so secretive about our relationship. I only have a handful of pictures of us together, and they're all on that phone. When it died this morning, I thought I had lost the last visual proof that our time together had been real. The full weight of what Zara had accomplished hit both of them simultaneously. By saving his phone, she had preserved the only remaining evidence of a love story that had ended in tragedy before it could truly begin. "Would you like to see them?" Khalil asked tentatively. "The photos of her?" Zara nodded, and Khalil opened his photo gallery. Together, they looked at images of Amara that Zara had never seen, candid shots of her sister laughing, thinking, animated in conversation with Khalil. In these pictures, Amara looked completely herself, but also somehow more than herself, elevated by love and happiness. "She's beautiful in these," Zara said softly. "So alive." "She was the most alive person I've ever known," Khalil replied. "Until today, I thought I would never meet anyone who shared that quality with her." He looked at Zara meaningfully, and she felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite identify. Not romantic attraction, the situation was far too complex for that, but a sense of connection, of shared understanding that went deeper than mere coincidence. "This can't be random," Khalil said, echoing her thoughts. "You fixing my phone, me seeing her picture, discovering this connection. It's like she somehow brought us together." Zara looked down at her phone, still displaying Amara's graduation photo. For the first time in 3 years, the image didn't just represent loss and grief. It also represented the possibility of something new, a connection to someone who had loved her sister as deeply as she had, who could help her understand parts of Amara's life that had been mysterious to her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Khalil met her eyes with an expression of gentle uncertainty. "I don't know, but I think Amara would want us to find out together." The hours that followed felt suspended in time. As evening approached and the sounds of Computer Village began to fade, Zara and Khalil remained in her workshop, surrounded by the gentle hum of electronics and the weight of revelations that had changed everything they thought they knew about their own lives. They had been talking for 3 hours straight about Amara, about grief, about the strange mathematics of loss that somehow brought people together. Khalil had called his driver and sent him away, while Zara had quietly flipped the sign on her workshop door to closed, though she hadn't consciously decided to do so. "I need to show you something," Khalil said, pulling up a document on his now-functioning phone. "Something I've been working on that I think will help you understand how deeply she affected my life." He handed her the device, and Zara found herself looking at detailed project proposals for something called the Amara Initiative, a comprehensive digital literacy and technology access program spanning 12 African countries. The scope was breathtaking: mobile repair training centers, community technology hubs, scholarships for young women in engineering, microfinance programs for tech entrepreneurs. "You named it after her," Zara said, scrolling through the extensive documentation. "Everything I've built since losing her has been an attempt to honor what she believed in," Khalil replied. "She used to say that technology was only as valuable as the lives it improved. This project is designed to create exactly the kind of impact she envisioned." Zara studied the project details with growing amazement. The budget alone was staggering, tens of millions of dollars committed to infrastructure, training, and long-term sustainability. But what struck her more than the money was the thoughtfulness behind every element, the clear understanding of real community needs that could only come from someone who had genuinely listened to Amara's vision. "This is incredible," she said. "The training center component especially. It's exactly what someone like me needed when I was starting out. Access to proper tools, mentorship, connections to larger opportunities." "That's intentional," Khalil said. "One of Amara's biggest frustrations was how much talent gets wasted simply because people don't have access to resources or recognition. She said the world was full of geniuses working in small shops and backyard workshops, solving problems that no one with power ever noticed." Zara felt a complex mixture of emotions. pride in her sister's vision, sadness that Amara would never see it implemented, and something else she couldn't quite identify. A sense of possibility, perhaps, or destiny. "There's something else," Khalil continued, and his tone suggested he was about to share something significant. "The Nigeria pilot program for this initiative. I've been trying to find the right local partner for months. Someone with real technical expertise, community connections, and the kind of authentic understanding that can't be taught in business school." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "I think I just found her," Zara's breath caught. "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious. What you did today, not just fixing my phone, but the way you approached it, the technology you've developed. Your philosophy about serving people who need help most, it's exactly what this project needs." "I run a tiny repair shop," Zara protested. "I don't have experience with large-scale programs or international development or—" "You have something more important than experience," Khalil interrupted gently. "You have the same heart Amara had, the same commitment to using your gifts in service of others. And your technical skills are extraordinary. I've seen that firsthand." Zara stood up and began pacing the small workshop, her mind racing. The opportunity Khalil was describing was beyond anything she had ever imagined for herself. But it was also terrifying in its scope and implications. "I don't even have a passport," she said, voicing one of the more practical concerns flooding her thoughts. "That can be arranged," Khalil replied calmly, "along with any training, resources, or support you need. This isn't about dropping you into something you're unprepared for. It's about building a program around someone who already embodies its and core values." "But why me, really? You could have your pick of qualified professionals, people with credentials and experience and—" "Because," Khalil said, standing to face her, "in 3 hours of conversation, you've shown me more wisdom about technology's true purpose than I've encountered in years of working with so-called experts. Because when I brought you a broken phone, you didn't just fix it. You restored something I thought I had lost forever. Because when you talk about your work, you sound exactly like Amara did when she talked about hers." He reached for his phone again, navigating to a voice recording. "I want you to hear something," he said. "This is Amara talking about her vision for technology in Africa. I recorded it during one of our conversations about her thesis project." He pressed play, and suddenly Amara's voice filled the workshop, warm, passionate, alive with conviction. "Technology shouldn't be about replacing human connection," her recorded voice said. "It should be about enhancing it, empowering it, making it possible for people to reach their full potential regardless of where they start from. The girl fixing phones on the side of the road has just as much right to advanced tools and global opportunities as someone working in Silicon Valley. Our job isn't to bring technology to people, it's to make sure people have access to technology's benefits." Zara felt tears streaming down her face. Hearing her sister's voice again after 3 years was overwhelming enough, but hearing Amara articulate ideas that so perfectly matched her own beliefs about her work felt like receiving a message from beyond. "She would want you to do this," Khalil said softly when the recording ended. "She would want you to take her vision and make it bigger, stronger, more real than she could have made it alone." "I need time to think," Zara said, wiping her eyes. It's too much to process all at once." "Of course," Khalil replied immediately. "Take all the time you need, but while you're thinking, I want you to consider something else." He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back before handing it to her. "Tomorrow evening, I'm having dinner with the Nigerian Minister of Technology and several international development officials. They're reviewing final proposals for digital infrastructure partnerships. If you decide you're interested in this opportunity, I'd like you to come with me. Not as my employee or assistant, but as my partner in this initiative." Zara stared at the card, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. I wouldn't know what to say to people like that. You'd say exactly what you said to me today, Khalil replied. You'd tell them what technology means to the people who need it most, and why that should matter to anyone who claims to care about development. As if sensing her continued uncertainty, Khalil tried a different approach. Let me ask you something, he said. What do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Not what you think is realistic or practical, but what would make you feel like you had honored your gifts and your sister's memory? Zara considered the question seriously. I'd want to have helped more people, trained others to do what I do, maybe created opportunities for young women who love technology but don't see a path forward. I'd want to feel like I had used everything Amara taught me about believing in bigger possibilities. And that's exactly what this initiative is designed to accomplish, Khalil said. The only question is whether you're willing to believe you deserve the chance to make it happen. The workshop fell quiet again as Zara wrestled with fears and possibilities in equal measure. Outside, Lagos continued its evening rhythm, vendors closing their stalls, commuters heading home, the city transitioning from the energy of commerce to the slower pace of evening life. I'm scared, Zara admitted finally. Good, Khalil replied. Amara was scared too when she decided to pursue her master's degree. She told me that the things worth doing are usually the things that scare us most. What if I'm not smart enough? For this kind of work, you rebuilt a piece of technology I had given up for dead, using equipment you designed yourself. You're more than smart enough. What if I embarrass myself in front of important people? Then you'll have proven you're human. The important people worth impressing will respect your authenticity more than your polish. What if I fail? Khalil smiled gently. Then you'll have failed while attempting something meaningful. That's still better than succeeding at something small. Zara looked around her workshop, at the modest tools that had been her world, at the simple space where she had built her reputation, one repair at a time. It was a good life, an honest life. But hearing Amara's voice again had reminded her of conversations they used to have about dreams that extended beyond survival, about using their gifts to create change rather than just respond to problems. If I said yes, she said carefully, what would happen to this place, to my current customers, to my brother's education? Nothing would have to change immediately, Khalil assured her. We'd start slowly, building the program while you maintain your current work, and your brother's education would be fully supported. That's not even a question. This opportunity should enhance your life, not require you to abandon everything you've built. You really think I could do this? I think Amara chose her sister well, Khalil replied. I think she would be incredibly proud of who you've become and excited about who you could still become. As the last light faded outside her workshop, Zara felt something shifting inside her, a loosening of the small, careful boundaries she had built around her life. A stirring of the same ambition and idealism that had always lived in Amara. Can I give you an answer tomorrow? She asked. Of course, Khalil said, though she could see the hope in his eyes. Whatever you decide, I'm grateful that fixing my phone led me to this conversation. Meeting you, it feels like getting a piece of her back. It feels that way to me too, Zara admitted. As Khalil prepared to leave, he paused at the door of her workshop. One more thing, he said. Whatever you decide about the initiative, I hope we can stay in touch. I'd like to keep sharing memories of her with someone who loved her too. I'd like that, Zara replied. After he left, Zara sat alone, in her workshop, surrounded by the familiar comfort of her tools and the unfamiliar weight of possibility. Her phone lay on the workbench, Amara's smiling face still visible on the screen, and for the first time in 3 years, that image seemed less like a memorial to the past and more like an invitation to the future. Zara barely slept that night. She lay in her small bed above the workshop, staring at the ceiling while her mind churned through everything that had happened. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Khalil's tears when he recognized Amara's photo, heard her sister's voice talking about technology and empowerment, felt the weight of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. By dawn, she had made a decision, or rather several decisions that would need to unfold carefully throughout the day. Her first stop was the university where her brother Emmanuel was completing his engineering degree. She found him in the library, surrounded by textbooks and calculator, working on what appeared to be complex structural calculations. When he looked up and saw her approaching, his face immediately creased with concern. "Zara? What are you doing? Here so early? Is everything okay?" She sat down across from him, suddenly uncertain how to begin explaining what had happened. How do you tell someone that your entire life might be about to change because of a broken phone and a photograph? "I need to tell you about something that happened yesterday," she began carefully. "Something that might change things for both of us." Over the next 30 minutes, she told Emmanuel the entire story. About Khalil, about the phone repair, about discovering his connection to Amara, about the opportunity he had offered her. Emmanuel listened in complete silence, his expression shifting from confusion to amazement to something approaching awe. "This is incredible, sister," he said when she finished. "It's like Amara is still looking out for us somehow." "You think I should do it?" Zara asked. Emmanuel leaned back, in his chair, studying her face. "I think you've been hiding yourself in that workshop for 3 years. Ever since Amara died, you've made yourself smaller, safer. But yesterday proved that you're capable of so much more than just surviving." "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I fail? What if I'm not smart enough or sophisticated enough for this kind of work? What if you succeed?" Emmanuel countered. "What if you're exactly what this project needs? What if this is why you've been developing all those skills, building all that expertise, for something bigger than you ever imagined?" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Zara, you've been supporting my education for years, sacrificing your own opportunities so I could have mine. Maybe it's time for you to believe you deserve opportunities too. But what about your tuition, your living expenses?" Emmanuel smiled. "From what you've told me about this Khalil and his resources, I don't think my education costs are going to be a problem anymore. And honestly, I'd rather see you take this chance than have you spend the rest of your life playing it safe for my sake." His words hit her with unexpected force. She realized that somewhere along the way, her determination to protect and provide for her brother had become an excuse to avoid taking risks with her own life. "There's a dinner tonight," she said, "with government ministers and development officials. Khalil wants me to come as his partner in presenting this initiative." "Then you should go," Emmanuel said firmly, "and you should wear Amara's blue dress." Zara blinked. "What? The one she wore to her graduation? It's still in your closet, isn't it? She'd want you to wear it for something this important." The thought of wearing Amara's dress felt both terrifying and somehow right. It would be like carrying her sister with her into this new possibility. "I don't know how to talk to government ministers," Zara said. "You know how to talk about what matters to you," Emmanuel replied. "That's all you need." After leaving the university, Zara spent the afternoon preparing in ways both practical and emotional. She researched the officials who would be attending. The dinner familiarized herself with current technology policy discussions and tried to anticipate questions she might be asked. But more importantly, she spent time in quiet reflection, thinking about what Amara would want her to do. As evening approached, she found herself standing in front of her mirror, wearing Amara's blue dress. It fit perfectly. They had always been nearly the same size, and the color brought out the warmth in her skin. For the first time in years, she looked confident, capable, ready for something beyond the modest boundaries of her daily life. Khalil arrived precisely on time, driving a sleek black sedan that looked appropriately diplomatic for the evening ahead. When he saw her, his expression registered genuine surprise and admiration. "You look radiant," he said. "Amara would be so proud." "I'm wearing her dress," Zara said, smoothing the fabric nervously. "My brother suggested it." "It's perfect," Khalil replied. "Are you ready for this?" "No," Zara said honestly. "But I'm ready to try." The dinner was held at a high-end restaurant in Victoria Island, the kind of place Zara had only seen from the outside. As they walked in, she felt momentarily overwhelmed by the elegance. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in formal attire. But Khalil's steady presence beside her helped calm her nerves. The other attendees were exactly as intimidating as she had expected. The Minister of Technology, two officials from international development agencies, a representative from the World Bank, and several other people whose titles suggested significant influence over policy and funding decisions. When Khalil introduced her as his technical partner and local implementation specialist, she felt their evaluating gazes and fought the urge to retreat into her familiar shyness. "Ms. Okafor," said Dr. Adebayo, the Minister of Technology, "Khalil has told us you have extensive experience with community-based technology solutions. Could you tell us about your background?" This was the moment Zara had been dreading, having to present herself and her qualifications to people who were accustomed to dealing with PhDs and corporate executives. But instead of deflecting or minimizing her experience, she found herself thinking about Amara's voice on that recording, talking about the girl fixing phones on the side of the road, deserving the same opportunities as anyone else. "I don't have formal credentials," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm self-taught, working out of a small repair shop in Computer Village. But over the past decade, I've repaired thousands of devices for people who couldn't afford to replace them. Students whose entire academic careers depended on a functioning laptop, small business owners whose customer databases lived on damaged phones, grandparents whose only connection to distant family was through technology. They couldn't afford to lose." She paused, gaining confidence as she spoke about work she knew intimately. "What I've learned is that technology's real value isn't in its sophistication, it's in its accessibility. The most advanced smartphone in the world is useless if people can't afford to fix it when it breaks, or if they don't have the skills to use it effectively. Real digital inclusion means meeting people where they are and building solutions that work within their actual circumstances, not the circumstances we think they should have." The officials around the table were listening intently now, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine interest. "Can you give us a specific example?" asked the World Bank representative. Zara told them about the university student's tablet, how 3 expensive repair shops had declared it unfixable, how she had salvaged it using improvised tools and patient problem-solving, how that device contained research that could potentially impact food security for millions of people. "The difference wasn't that I had better equipment," she explained. "It was that I understood the real stakes. For those other shops, it was just another broken device. For me, it was someone's dreams and 2 years of work. When you understand what technology actually means to people's lives, you approach problems differently." Dr. Adebayo leaned forward. "That's exactly the kind of perspective we need more of in policy discussions. Too often we design programs based on what we think communities need rather than understanding what they actually need, which is why," Khalil interjected smoothly, "the Amara initiative is designed around local expertise and community input. We're not bringing solutions to people. We're empowering local experts like Zara to design and implement solutions that work for their specific contexts." The conversation continued for 2 hours, with Zara finding herself increasingly comfortable, contributing her insights and perspectives. The officials asked detailed questions about implementation challenges, sustainability models, and scaling strategies. To her surprise, she found she had thoughtful answers to most of their questions, drawn from years of practical experience solving real problems with limited resources. "Ms. Okafor," said the international development official toward the end of the evening, "I have to say, your perspective is refreshing. We see too many proposals that focus on technology for technology's sake. You clearly understand that the human element is what makes any initiative successful or not." "That's what my sister always taught me," Zara replied. "She used to say that technology without empathy is just expensive machinery." After dinner, as they walked back to Khalil's car, Zara felt simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. The evening had gone better than she had dared to hope, but the reality of what she was considering was still overwhelming. "You were magnificent," Khalil said, as they drove through the Lagos evening traffic. "Completely natural, completely authentic." They were impressed. I could see it. "I actually enjoyed it," Zara admitted with surprise. "Once I started talking about the work itself, I forgot to be nervous." "That's because you were talking about something you believe in passionately. Passion is always more convincing than credentials." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Khalil spoke again. "So what are you thinking? Are you ready to make this official?" Zara looked out at the city lights streaming past. Her city, her home, her world that might be about to expand in ways she had never imagined. "I want to do it," she said quietly. "Not just for the opportunity, but because I think Amara would want me to, and because I think I might actually be good at it." "You'll be extraordinary at it," Khalil said with conviction. "And we'll be honoring her memory by building something she would have loved." As they pulled up to her workshop, Zara felt the weight of her decision settling over her, not as a burden, but as a responsibility she was finally ready to accept. "When do we start?" she asked. Khalil smiled. "How about tomorrow? We have a lot of work to do, and I have a feeling Amara is going to be very proud of what we build together." Standing outside her workshop in Amara's blue dress, looking up at the stars above Lagos, Zara felt her sister's presence more strongly than she had in 3 years. Not as a loss to be mourned, but as a love that continued to create possibilities in the world. Tomorrow her life would begin to change. Tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be. 6 months later, Zara stood in what had once been an empty warehouse in Ikeja, watching as the final pieces of equipment were installed in Nigeria's first comprehensive community technology center. The transformation was breathtaking. What had been a cavernous, neglected space was now a gleaming facility with repair stations, training classrooms, 3D printing labs, and a women's entrepreneurship incubator. The Amara initiative had moved faster than anyone had expected. Within weeks of that dinner meeting, funding had been approved, partnerships established, and construction begun. Zara had found herself at the center of it all. Her small repair shop expanded into a coordination hub where she worked alongside engineers, architects, and policy specialists from around the world. But success hadn't come without challenges that tested every aspect of her newfound confidence. The first major crisis had arrived just 2 months into the project. A prominent technology journalist had published an investigative piece questioning Khalil's qualifications and Zara's credentials, suggesting that the initiative was more about corporate image building than genuine community impact. The article had been brutal, particularly in its characterization of Zara as an unqualified local hire, chosen for symbolic rather than substantive reasons. Zara remembered reading the piece in her workshop late one evening, feeling every insecurity she had worked to overcome come flooding back. The journalist had done his research, contrasting her lack of formal education with the advanced degrees held by other tech initiative leaders across Africa. He had questioned whether someone who fixes phones in a market stall could possibly oversee a multi-million-dollar infrastructure project. Khalil had flown to Lagos the day after the article appeared, finding Zara sitting in her workshop surrounded by printed copies of the piece, highlighting every criticism with methodical precision. "I should withdraw," she had said without looking up. "This project is too important to be damaged by questions about my qualifications." "The only question," Khalil had replied, sitting across from her, "is whether you're going to let fear disguised as journalism keep you from doing work that could change thousands of lives." "But what if he's right? What if I really am out of my depth?" Khalil had pulled out his phone and shown her videos from the pilot training programs she had already launched. Young women learning circuit repair, small business owners discovering e-commerce possibilities, elderly community members gaining digital literacy skills they had never thought they could master. "Does this look like the work of someone who's out of her depth?" he had asked. The controversy had ultimately strengthened the project rather than weakened it. Community leaders had rallied to Zara's defense, sharing stories of how her work had impacted their lives long before any international initiative existed. Local newspapers had published editorials, pointing out that perhaps the real question wasn't whether Zara was qualified enough for the project, but whether the project was worthy of someone who had already been serving her community with distinction for years. Most powerfully, 3 of Nigeria's most respected technology academics had co-authored a response piece detailing Zara's innovations and community impact, arguing that her approach represented exactly the kind of grassroots expertise that development initiatives typically overlook to their detriment. The experience had taught Zara something crucial about the difference between confidence and credentials. She might not have certificates on her wall, but she had results in people's lives. She might not speak the formal language of international development, but she understood intimately the realities those programs were trying to address. Now, standing in the completed training center, she felt the deep satisfaction of work that had moved beyond defending itself to proving its worth through tangible impact. "The first cohort of technician trainees graduated yesterday," reported Kemi, her newly hired program coordinator, a brilliant recent engineering graduate who had grown up 3 neighborhoods away from Zara's workshop. 87% job placement rate within 2 weeks of completion. Most of them are already earning more than they were in their previous work. Zara nodded, reviewing the metrics that had become a regular part of her new reality. The Amara initiative tracked everything: training completion rates, income improvements, technology adoption patterns, small business creation, women's participation levels. The numbers told a story of genuine transformation, not just individual success stories, but measurable community change. "What about the mobile units?" Zara asked, referring to the retrofitted vehicles that brought training and repair services to rural communities too remote for people to travel to the main center. "Ahead of schedule," Kemi replied with a grin. "The team in Kano is already requesting a second vehicle to meet demand. Apparently, word is spreading faster than we anticipated." The mobile units had been Zara's idea, born from her understanding that many of the people who most needed technology support were the least able to access centralized services. Each vehicle was essentially a complete repair shop and training classroom on wheels, equipped with solar power systems, satellite internet, and all the tools needed to provide comprehensive technology services in any location. The innovation had attracted international attention, with delegations from other African countries visiting to study the model for potential replication. Zara had found herself presenting the mobile unit concept at conferences in Accra, Nairobi, and Dakar. Her expertise sought by development organizations across the continent. "There's something else," Kemi said, her tone suggesting important news. "The ministry called this morning. Dr. Adebayo wants to discuss expanding the initiative to 6 additional states. Full government partnership integrated into the national digital literacy strategy." Zara felt a familiar mixture of excitement and trepidation. Each expansion brought new opportunities to create impact, but also new levels of responsibility and complexity. "When does he want to meet?" "Next week." "But Zara," Kemi hesitated, "there's something you should know. The meeting isn't just about expansion. They want to offer you a formal position, Director of Community Technology Integration for the entire national program. The implications of such a position were staggering. It would mean moving beyond the pilot project to influencing technology policy for the entire country. It would mean resources, influence, and responsibility on a scale she was still learning to imagine. "I need to think about it," Zara said, though part of her already knew what Amara would have wanted her to do. That evening, Zara found herself back in her original workshop, which she had maintained even as her work had expanded far beyond its walls. The space felt smaller now, not because it had changed, but because she had grown. The tools that had once represented the limits of her possibilities now felt like the foundation for something much larger. Her phone buzzed with a message from Khalil, who was currently in Senegal working on the regional expansion of the initiative. Saw the news about the ministry position. Amara would be beside herself with pride. "Are you ready to change a country?" Instead of responding immediately, Zara opened her photo gallery and found the recording of Amara that Khalil had shared with her months ago. She played it again, listening to her sister's voice, talking about technology's potential to transform lives and communities. The girl fixing phones on the side of the road has just as much right to advanced tools and global opportunities as someone working in Silicon Valley, Amara's voice said. "Our job isn't to bring technology to people. It's to make sure people have access to technology's benefits." As the recording ended, Zara realized that accepting the ministry position would mean she could ensure that philosophy became national policy rather than just local practice. She could scale the community-centered approach that had made the Amara initiative successful across an entire country. Her phone rang, and she smiled when she saw Emmanuel's name on the screen. "I heard about the government offer," he said without preamble. "Are you going to accept?" "I think so," Zara replied. "It feels like the natural next step." "You know what this means, don't you?" Emmanuel said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "In less than a year, you've gone from fixing phones in a small workshop to potentially directing technology policy for 60 million people." "It doesn't feel real yet," Zara admitted. "It's real because you made it real. You took that chance, trusted your abilities, and built something extraordinary. And the best part is, you're just getting started." After ending the call, Zara walked outside and looked up at the Lagos skyline. The city that had once felt like the boundary of her world now felt like just the beginning of the territory she could impact. Somewhere out there were countless young women with technical gifts they hadn't been encouraged to develop. Countless communities that could benefit from thoughtful technology integration, countless possibilities for creating the kind of change Amara had envisioned. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Khalil. "Yes, I'm ready to change a country. Let's build something Amara would be proud of." His response came immediately. "She already is proud, and this is just the beginning." As Zara looked around her neighborhood, the place that had shaped her, challenged her, and ultimately prepared her for opportunities she had never dreamed possible, she felt the profound truth of that statement. The shy girl who had once hidden Her talents behind modesty and circumstances had discovered that her gifts were not limitations to be overcome, but foundations for transformation. The Amara initiative had grown far beyond what anyone had initially envisioned, but its core mission remained unchanged, ensuring that technology served people, especially those who had been overlooked by traditional approaches to development and innovation. Tomorrow, she would begin preparing for the ministry meeting. Next week, she would likely accept a position that would make her one of the most influential voices in African technology policy. Next month, she would start implementing programs that could impact millions of lives. But tonight, she was simply Zara Okafor, standing outside the workshop where everything had begun, grateful for a broken phone that had led to a repaired heart, and ready for whatever challenges and possibilities lay ahead. The future was vast, uncertain, and full of potential, exactly the way Amara would have wanted it to be. 2 years after that life-changing phone repair, Zara stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York, delivering a keynote address on technology, dignity, and human development. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same woman who had once been too shy to speak up in her own workshop was now addressing world leaders about the future of global technology policy. "When we talk about digital inclusion," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast assembly hall, "we're not talking about giving people access to devices. We're talking about giving people access to their own potential." The audience, ministers, CEOs, development officials from 193 countries, listened with the kind of attention that had become familiar to Zara over the past 18 months. Since accepting the position as Nigeria's Director of Community Technology Integration, she had become an internationally recognized voice on grassroots innovation and human-centered development. But the path to this moment had been anything but straightforward. The challenges had begun almost immediately after accepting the government position. Nigeria's technology sector was dominated by established interests, large corporations, international consulting firms, and political networks that had grown comfortable with traditional approaches to development funding. Zara's community-centered philosophy threatened business models that depended on expensive, top-down solutions. The first major confrontation had come during a budget hearing 6 months into her tenure. Senator Okafor, no relation despite the shared surname, had questioned the cost-effectiveness of the community training programs, arguing that the same money could purchase more sophisticated equipment for fewer, centralized facilities. "Why? Are we training market women to repair phones?" he had asked dismissively, "when we could be building world-class technology hubs in major cities?" Zara's response had become legendary in Nigerian policy circles. Instead of offering statistics or theoretical arguments, she had invited the senator to visit one of the rural communities where the mobile training units operated. "Come with me to Gboko," she had said calmly. "Meet Hawa, a 35-year-old, mother of 4, who learned circuit repair through our program and now runs the only electronics service center within 100 kilometers. Ask her customers, farmers who depend on solar-powered irrigation systems, teachers using tablets for remote education, health workers maintaining diagnostic equipment, whether her skills matter to their communities." The senator had accepted the challenge, perhaps expecting to find evidence supporting his skepticism. Instead, he had encountered a thriving ecosystem of technology adoption and local innovation that challenged every assumption he had held about rural capacity and urban superiority. Hawa had demonstrated how she had modified solar charging systems to work more efficiently in her region's specific climate conditions. She had shown him the small business network she had created, connecting rural entrepreneurs with urban markets through digital platforms. Most importantly, she had explained how the training program had given her not just technical skills but the confidence to see herself as someone whose expertise mattered. The senator had returned to Abuja as one of Zara's strongest supporters, publicly acknowledging that he had underestimated both the sophistication of rural communities and the transformative potential of investing in local capacity. That victory had established Zara's credibility within the government, but it had also attracted new forms of resistance. International consulting firms that had previously dominated Nigeria's technology contracts began raising questions about procurement processes and professional qualifications. They argued that giving major implementation responsibilities to local organizations without international certification created risks for project success and financial accountability. The controversy had escalated when a major Western technology company, frustrated by losing a contract to a consortium of Nigerian community organizations, had filed formal complaints with international development banks, questioning the technical standards and governance practices of Zara's programs. "They're trying to discredit everything we've built," Kemi had said during one particularly difficult week when 3 different auditing teams were simultaneously reviewing program operations. "Let them audit," Zara had replied with a confidence that surprised even herself. "Our results speak for themselves." The audits had indeed vindicated her approach. Independent evaluations found that community-led programs achieved higher completion rates, better long-term sustainability, and greater local ownership than traditional externally managed projects. The financial audits revealed that the community-centered approach delivered comparable or superior outcomes at significantly lower cost than conventional alternatives. More importantly, the evaluation teams had documented something that couldn't be captured in traditional metrics: the way the programs had changed, how communities saw themselves and their capabilities. Town after town reported increased civic engagement, new businesses, improved educational outcomes, and greater gender equality in economic participation. The international recognition had followed naturally. Zara found herself invited to conferences in Geneva, Singapore, and São Paulo. The mobile training unit model had been adapted and implemented in 12 other countries. The UN had designated the Amara initiative as a flagship example of the Sustainable Development Goals in action. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition had come from an unexpected source. During a conference in Dubai, her first time visiting the city where Khalil had based his operations, she had been approached by an elderly man whose face seemed familiar despite her certainty they had never met. "Excuse me," he had said in accented English. "Are you Zara Okafor?" When she confirmed her identity, his eyes had filled with tears. "I am Ibrahim al-Rashid," he had said, "Khalil's father. The man whose car broke down in Lagos 3 years ago." The moment had been overwhelming for both of them. Here was the person whose mechanical problem had inadvertently set everything in motion, whose breakdown had led to Khalil visiting her. Workshop, which had led to the phone repair that revealed their connection to Amara, which had led to everything that followed. "My son tells me that you have built something extraordinary," Ibrahim had said, "something that honors your sister's memory while creating opportunities for thousands of people." "Your breakdown started it all," Zara had replied with a smile. "If your car hadn't chosen to stop working in Lagos, perhaps some things are meant to happen," Ibrahim had suggested gently. "Perhaps Amara is still finding ways to bring good people together." That conversation had led to an unexpected development. Ibrahim, deeply moved by learning about the Amara initiative's impact, had established a substantial endowment fund specifically to support technology training for young African women. The Ibrahim Foundation for Digital Inclusion had become a major funder of similar programs across the continent. Now, standing before the UN Assembly, Zara reflected on the impossible chain of connections that had brought her to this moment. A shy repair shop owner had become a global advocate for human-centered technology policy. A local initiative inspired by personal loss had influenced international development practice. A chance encounter had created ripple effects that were still expanding across continents. The young woman fixing phones in her neighborhood workshop, she told the assembly, has the same right to shape our technological future as the executives in Silicon Valley boardrooms. Our job is not to bring technology to communities. Our job is to ensure that communities have the power to shape how technology serves their needs and aspirations. After her speech during the reception that followed, Zara found herself in conversation with ministers and development leaders from around the world. Many wanted to discuss replicating the Nigerian model in their own countries. Others sought her advice on addressing resistance from established interests that preferred traditional approaches to development funding. The key, she found herself saying repeatedly, is trusting people to solve their own problems when given access to appropriate tools and training. Most communities know exactly what they need. They just need support to build their capacity to address those needs. Later that evening, in her hotel room overlooking Manhattan, Zara video-called Khalil, who was currently in Nairobi working on the East African expansion of the initiative. "How did it go?" he asked, though her expression had already given him the answer. "Better than I ever imagined possible," she replied. 3 more countries want to implement the mobile training model. The World Bank is revising their community development guidelines based on our outcomes. And someone from the Gates Foundation wants to discuss scaling the approach globally. "Amara would be amazed," Khalil said with a smile that mixed pride and wistfulness. "I think she knew," Zara replied. "I think somehow she always knew that her ideas would find ways to keep growing, even after she was gone." They talked for another hour, planning the next phase of expansions, discussing new innovations they wanted to test, and sharing stories from their respective programs. Their relationship had evolved into something unique, not romantic, but deeper than mere professional partnership. They were 2 people bound together by shared loss, who had chosen to transform grief into constructive action. As the call ended, Zara looked out at the New York skyline and thought about the workshop in Lagos, where everything had begun. Tomorrow, she would fly back to Nigeria, where hundreds of communities were implementing programs that hadn't existed 3 years ago. Next month, she would attend the official launch of similar initiatives in Ghana, Kenya, and Morocco. The shy young woman, who had once hidden her talents behind modesty and circumstances, had discovered that her gifts were never meant to be small or local. They were meant to be seeds that could grow into forests of possibility, creating shade and shelter for people she would never meet in places she might never visit. But she would always be grateful that the journey had started in a small workshop in Lagos, with a broken phone and a stranger's tears, and a sister's love that refused to be limited by death. The ripples were still spreading, and they showed no signs of stopping. 5 years had passed since that extraordinary day when a broken phone had changed everything. Zara stood in the ceremonial hall of the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, surrounded by heads of state, technology leaders, and development officials from across the continent. Today marked the official launch of the Continental Digital Inclusion Framework, a comprehensive policy blueprint that would guide technology development across all 55 African Union member states. The framework was built entirely around the community-centered principles that Zara had pioneered in her small Lagos workshop. What had begun as one woman's compassionate approach to fixing broken devices had evolved into continental policy that would shape how Africa engaged with technology for generations to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the chairperson of the African Union Commission, "it is my honor to present the architect of our new digital future, Dr. Zara Okafor, Director General of the African Center for Technology and Human Development." The title still felt surreal to Zara. The honorary doctorate from the University of Lagos had been awarded just 6 months earlier, recognizing her contributions to technology policy and community development. The position with the African Union had followed quickly after, offering her the opportunity to implement her vision across an entire continent. But as she approached the podium to deliver her keynote address, Zara's thoughts weren't on titles or recognition. They were on the people whose lives had been transformed by the simple idea that technology should serve human dignity rather than corporate profit margins. 5 years ago, she began, her voice carrying easily through the hall, I was working in a small repair shop in Lagos, fixing devices that others had declared beyond repair. Today, across our continent, millions of people are discovering that they too were never beyond repair. They were simply waiting for the right tools, the right training, and most importantly, the right recognition of their inherent capabilities. In the audience, she could see familiar faces that represented the extraordinary journey she had traveled. Emmanuel, now Dr. Emmanuel Okafor himself, having completed his PhD in sustainable engineering and currently directing the Technical Innovation Division of the Amara Initiative. Kemi, who had become her chief of staff and the operational genius behind the continental expansion. Hawa, the rural technician whose story had convinced a skeptical senator, now flew in from Nigeria as a representative of the Global Council of Community Technology Leaders, and in the front row, Khalil al-Rashid sat beside his father, Ibrahim, both of them wearing expressions of profound pride and satisfaction. Khalil had been instrumental in establishing the funding mechanisms that made continental expansion possible, while Ibrahim's foundation had become the largest private supporter of women's technology education across Africa. The numbers tell. One story, Zara continued, referring to the comprehensive impact report that had been distributed to all attendees. Over 2 million people trained in essential technology skills, 40,000 new businesses created by program graduates, a 37% increase in women's participation in the technology sector across participating countries. Rural-urban income gaps reduced by an average of 22% in program areas. She paused, allowing the magnitude of those statistics to settle in the room. But behind every number is a human story. A young mother who can now support her family while working from home through digital platforms. A farmer who uses precision agriculture apps to increase crop yields while preserving soil health. A grandmother who maintains connection with her grandchildren, studying abroad through video calls she learned to make herself. As she spoke, Zara reflected on the unexpected turns her life had taken. The shy woman who had once struggled to speak to strangers now regularly addressed world leaders. The self-taught technician who had worried about her lack of formal credentials now advised governments on policy development. The local repair shop owner who had worked to survive had become an architect of continental transformation. But perhaps the most profound change wasn't in her circumstances. It was in her understanding of what had always been possible. The gifts she had thought were too small to matter had turned out to be exactly what the world needed. Her instinct to see the person behind the broken device, to understand technology as a means of preserving human dignity rather than replacing human connection, had resonated far beyond anything she could have imagined. Today we launch more than a policy framework, she told the assembly. We launch a new understanding of development itself, one that recognizes that communities don't need to be saved by outside experts, but empowered to save themselves. We affirm that innovation doesn't only happen in urban centers and corporate laboratories, but wherever human creativity meets genuine need. After her speech, during the signing ceremony, where all 55 member states formally adopted the Digital Inclusion Framework, Zara found herself in a quiet corridor with Khalil and Ibrahim. The three of them had developed a tradition of taking a moment together at major milestones to honor Amara's memory and reflect on the journey they had shared. "She would have been 31 today," Khalil said softly. It was Amara's birthday, and though they had never planned it this way, somehow all their major announcements seemed to align with dates that had been important to her. "I think she would be amazed by all this," Zara replied, gesturing toward the ceremonial activity surrounding them. "But I also think she would remind us that the real work happens in communities, not conference halls." Ibrahim smiled. "That sounds exactly like something she would say, always bringing conversations back to the people who actually matter." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. 3 people bound together by love for someone they had lost, but whose influence continued to create positive change in the world. "There's something I want to tell you both," Zara said eventually, "something I've been thinking about as I prepare for the next phase of this work." Khalil and Ibrahim looked at her expectantly. "I've decided to step back from the administrative roles," she said. "The AU position, the international speaking, the policy development. I want to transition those responsibilities to the incredible team we've built. I want to go back to communities, back to hands-on work, back to training the next generation of community technology leaders." "Back to your workshop?" Khalil asked with a knowing smile. "In a way, yes. But now with the resources and networks to make that workshop a model for thousands of others." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "I've learned that I'm most effective when I'm working directly with people, solving real problems, building capacity from the ground up. The policy work was necessary, but it's not where my heart is." Ibrahim nodded approvingly. "That's wisdom. Knowing where your gifts are most needed and having the courage to stay true to that calling, even when other opportunities beckon. Besides," Zara added with a grin, "someone needs to train the next Zara Okafor, and the next one after that. This movement can't depend on any single person. It needs to become a way of thinking that spreads organically through communities." Over the following hours, as the formal ceremonies concluded and delegates began planning implementation strategies for their respective countries, Zara felt a deep sense of completion. Not the completion of an ending, but of a beginning that had found its proper foundation. That evening, she called Emmanuel from her hotel room in Addis Ababa. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Watching your little workshop idea become continental policy." "Overwhelming and ordinary at the same time," she replied honestly. "Overwhelming because of the scale, ordinary because it still feels like the same work. Just helping people solve problems they couldn't solve alone." "You know what I think?" Emmanuel said. "I think this was always going to happen. Maybe not exactly this way, but somehow. You were always meant to do work that mattered beyond our neighborhood. Maybe. Or maybe Amara's love was always meant to keep creating good things in the world, and I just happened to be in the right place to help it along." "Both can be true," Emmanuel replied wisely. After ending the call, Zara opened her laptop and began drafting a different kind of document, not a policy framework or impact report, but a simple training manual for community technology leaders. It would be practical, accessible, focused on building the kinds of relationships and understanding that turn technical skills into community transformation. As she worked, her phone displayed the same wallpaper it had carried for 5 years. Amara's graduation photo, her sister's smile as radiant as ever, but now the image carried different emotions, not just loss and memory, but gratitude and continuation. Amara's dreams hadn't died with her. They had found new life through the people who chose to carry them forward. Tomorrow, Zara would fly back to Lagos, back to the workshop where everything had begun. She would continue the work of training and mentoring, but now with the knowledge that every person she helped develop their technical skills was part of a movement that stretched across continents. The shy young woman who had once fixed a broken phone for a stranger had discovered that some repairs create ripple effects that never end. Sometimes helping one person leads to helping millions. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness become the foundation for the largest transformations. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to believe that your gifts matter, you discover that they matter more than you ever dared to dream. In workshops across Africa, phones were being repaired, skills were being shared, and communities were discovering their own capacity for innovation and growth. The work would continue, one device at a time, one person at a time, one community at a time, just the way Amara would have wanted it to be. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't. Want to pass these up? Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.